Good evening, and welcome to this NUPI interview about the recent elections in Myanmar. I am Bjørnar Sverdrup-Thygeson, and I am standing here together with senior researcher Marc Lanteigne. And Marc, what is the significance of this week's elections in Myanmar?
Thank you very much, Bjørnar. It's been a very, very interesting week in Myanmar, to put it mildly. An election on the 8th of November. This is the first election that the country has seen since 2010. And that election was not very well regarded. It was basically fraudulent. It was corrupted. And the main opposition party, the National League of Democracy, boycotted the event. And its leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, was in jail. So it's a much different situation now. Yeah. This has been the most widely organized vote in a very long time. Although it hasn't been completely free and fair, it has been seen as a vast improvement over previous votes.
So, because who are the main contenders in this election?
Well, the main opposition group is the National League of Democracy. As I say, it's led by Aung San Suu Kyi, who has been out of prison now for more than 5 years. She is back in a leadership role, and she has been a very active campaigner for her party. And it is looking like the NLD is winning quite a bit of the votes. The results are coming in, and it looks like the NLD will have a majority. So we are seeing the first time that Myanmar has had a civilian government since the early 1960s, so quite the event. So the NLD is the first major player. There are many other parties that were contesting the election, more than 90 at last count, but the only two that were really in contention were the NLD, as well as the United Solidarity and Development Party, the USD, which was heavily backed by the military. Its leader, the current president, Thein Sein, was a former army officer, but he gave up his military role. He became a civilian, and he was the one who was largely responsible for starting the reform process to have Myanmar open up to the outside world, to begin economic reforms, and the reforms which led to these elections. So his party was expected to not necessarily do well, but it looks like his party has done much more expected. Very unlikely that many seats will be taken by this party when the returns finally come in.
So the very interesting election results that we're looking at so far, at least, waiting for the final tally. What do you think this election means for the economy of Myanmar?
The economy of Myanmar has a lot of improvement ahead of it. It has a lot of change ahead of it. Myanmar was isolated economically for an extremely long time. Since the late 1980s, when we had a military junta in charge, many countries, including the United States, Western Europe, Japan, essentially isolated, cut off Myanmar economically. Trade was reduced to a crawl. Very few countries, one exception being China, were openly trading with Myanmar at this time. The result was widespread poverty. There are serious problems with smuggling, with corruption, and with drugs. All of this is going to have to be addressed in a very short time. With the new government in place, even though the NLD is very likely going to win the majority, it is going to have to work on these reforms, economic, political, and so forth, with a military still very powerful politically. The Constitution of Myanmar, it was recently revised back in 2008, and it guarantees the military 25% of the seats in both the upper and the lower house of the Myanmar parliament. It also gives them a lot of say over key ministries. So any government that comes in, any government, even if it's NLD majority, is still going to have to cooperate with the military, and that's going to be a very big undertaking. The other issue politically is that Aung San Suu Kyi cannot stand as president herself. Another change to the Constitution, and it's a bit of an odd one, was that if you have a foreign spouse or foreign children, you are ineligible. Aung San Suu Kyi's husband was British, as are her children, so that automatically removes her from contention. Now, she has promised that she will still play a huge part of Myanmar politics after the election. She's even promised to kind of govern above the president, whatever that means. And there's always the possibility that the Constitution can be changed again, but there's going to be a very delicate back and forth between the NLD, Aung San Suu Kyi, and the military. So it's going to be a very kind of awkward situation. Now, as for the economy, to go back to that point, the economy is now going to have to face a huge amount of international pressure, almost a victim of its own success. Many countries, Japan, Western Europe, Australia, the United States, many are very interested in investing in Myanmar right now. Look at the country. It has a population of 51 million, a very large potential market, and it is sandwiched between India and China and ASEAN. It is a major geographic pivot, so there will be the potential for a great deal of trade and investment to start up should this vote go well.
For many years, Myanmar has suffered from ethnic conflicts. Do you think the election results might potentially improve that situation?
You raise a very strong point. This election process and this opening up of Myanmar to the outside world is taking place at the same time as the outgoing government has been trying to negotiate a ceasefire with many armed militias, especially in the north, along the borders with China, for example, and it has been a very difficult undertaking. Some of these groups are looking for autonomy, some outright independence, and many of them are behind the smuggling of drugs, jade, other valuables in and out of the country. So this is also a very huge undertaking. Now, a few months ago, the Tencent government announced that it had established a ceasefire with 8 of the major 15 ethnic militia groups. So not what the government had in mind, still very short of what was expected, but it was seen as a step in the right direction. There are still 2 very large groups, the United Wa State Army, as well as the Kachin State, specifically the Kachin Independence Organization, which have not signed the ceasefire, and they're seen as still very dangerous in terms of the security situation, especially in Myanmar's far north. Now, this has started to become an international problem. In addition to the smuggling, in addition to drugs, the border between Myanmar and China, it's a very long border, has become very unstable. There have been problems with military incidents on both sides of the border, and this has caused a lot of problems in the relationship between the 2 countries, which normally has been very strong. So the ethnic militia issue is going to be something which the new government is going to have to address right away, because that will greatly determine how well the democratic process actually takes root. The other major ethnic issue, however, is in another part of the country, specifically to the west on the border with India and Bangladesh. Rakhine State is an area which has seen a great deal of communal violence between a Muslim minority group, commonly known as the Rohingya or Rohingya, and ethnic Burmese. Now, the number of Rohingya are anticipated to be about 1 million, but the actual number is still under dispute. The problem is, many in the Myanmar government do not consider the Rohingya to be a minority, to be legitimate Myanmar citizens. They are referred to as Bengali, they are often referred to as refugees who have crossed the border or migrants who have crossed the border from Bangladesh and do not have state rights. They have been left off the vote. They were left off the voting list, and this is a problem. And over the past year, there have been incidents of many Rohingya and Bangladeshi taking to boats, trying to escape Myanmar, going to other parts of Southeast Asia. So this became a very local, but now it's become very international. There was a major ethnic riot in Rakhine State in 2012. And the NLD has been under a lot of pressure to acknowledge that this is a very difficult human rights situation. But so far, the NLD has not really addressed that directly. It's a very, very sensitive issue throughout the country.
To follow up a bit more on the international consequences of this recent election, what might the changes be to Myanmar's foreign policy as a result of the voting, in particular its relations with Europe and also with Norway?
Okay. A lot is going to happen in a very short time. Ever since the reforms began around 2010, many countries, including the United States and in Western Europe, have started to re-engage the Myanmar government, not only economically but politically. There have been some high-level visits, for example, by President Obama, then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. There have been high-level visits from, for example, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. China has certainly stepped up its diplomacy there as well, because it feels that there's going to be a lot more of a crowded field taking place in the country soon. And Western Europe has certainly been active. There have been all kinds of potential for new investment from Northeast Asia, from Western Europe. And Norway has been a very long-standing player. This is not something which is widely known internationally, but Norway has been a major participant in the peace process and the ceasefire process. So it began to engage the Myanmar government very early. Norway also has a lot of economic interests. You look at Telenor and Statoil, they have very strong presence there. And Norway is certainly interested, should the economy continue to modernize, to develop. Norway very much wants to take advantage of that very special relationship. It's further helped by the awarding of the Nobel Prize to Ms. Aung San Suu Kyi in 1991. So Norway's in a very good position. But there are problems, though. This is going to be a country which is going to face a lot of potential investment all at the same time. Like a lot of countries want to start to deal with Myanmar. This could be very destabilizing, and the new government is going to have to make very sure that, okay, with this new money, this new opportunity from so many sectors, factories, textiles, tourism, making sure that this money is benefiting the country as a whole. We get back to the problem of corruption, back to the problem that the military is still politically powerful, economically powerful, and has a great deal of ownership of many key assets. So economic reform is going to be needed if all of this investment and outside attention is going to go forward. And I should add that after being isolated for so long, Myanmar is going to have to do a lot of catch-up in terms of international affairs, not only with the big players like the US and China and the European Union, but also with ASEAN. So it's a big job ahead.
It is indeed. Thank you, Mark, for your insights into what is indeed a tremendously interesting development in Myanmar right now. Any final viewpoints?
Well, so far, it has recently been announced that the NLD has won a majority of seats in the Myanmar parliament, so that will give the party the ability to choose the next president. Now, the parliament will not be sitting again until January. The president very likely will not be chosen until February. The president is chosen indirectly by parliament. So after that, then the hard part begins. Then the whole idea of power sharing and the whole idea of dealing with issues including the ceasefire and economic development. So the story's not over yet.
Yeah, we're just standing at the beginning here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you.